in relation to the matter and then proceed to debate the matter at a later time. So
Yep.
These are matters of interest to not only myself but to the wider public.
So, Councillor Ellis, what question would you like to ask?
I think there's a number of questions that need to be generally asked. The first I'll deal with is a couple of straightforward, simple questions. One is in relation to the applications of the differential rates, and my first question will be into proportions of the rating capacity, and that is noting the current financial and environmental conditions of our climate here in East Gippsland and the difficulty that our farmers are facing. Can you advise, is it correct that I've read that the farmers are being, of our $56 million in total of rate revenue, that the farmers fortunately are only paying $4.5 million of that total rate income? Which, the calculation accounts to about 8% of the rateable income. Is that a correct interpretation?
Yes, Councillor Ellis, the farm rate is proposed to generate $4.5 million of rate income for this 18-19 year of the 39.8 of general rates. Yes. That excludes the municipal charge that would apply to any farming properties, which is just the rate in the dollar, yes.
Good. Thank you. I shall have a series of other questions with your indulgence.
Yeah.
Oh, that's good. I note a local citizen, Mr. Roth, is in the chamber this evening, and he has an issue which I'd like to draw to the attention of Ms. Bennett in relation to the application of differential rates. Mr. Roth circulated a letter to each of the councillors at this table this evening in relation to his concerns into the matter. I'm wondering if you could provide me with some response as to the contents of his concern and letter. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Mr. Roth had two issues in his letter. One was in relation to what is required before a property can be treated as a single rating enterprise. And I'm happy to advise that we've corresponded offline with Mr. Roth about that and have essentially achieved the outcome he was seeking, so that's good luck story. The other issue is one about not so much differential rating, but how councillors determine what a property is classified as in terms of farm rate, general or commercial industrial, and whether officers are applying the correct methodology when looking at dual occupancy properties. It's the view of officers that we've responded to Mr. Roth on this issue over a number of years, and we had hoped that we'd put it to bed. However, that's clearly not the case, and I'd like to make it known to Mr. Roth that if he would like to come in and meet with us again, I'm very happy to sit down with him and walk him through our view of his concerns.
I'm prepared to stand back and let other councillors ask questions, but I do have some
I'll check with others first and then come back to you.
Thank you.
Is there any other questions? Councillor Roberts.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Ms. Collins, if the proposed rate increase of 2.25% was not imposed, what would be the remaining deficit on the, surplus on the budget?
So if we reduced the 2.25 to zero, then we are looking at about $900,000 that we would have to that would either come off the bottom line of the surplus, but there's in effect $900,000 which either ends up not in the bank at the end of the year, or not allocated to services, and we would have to review, and obviously that's a significant change to the budget, which is obviously another consideration for council too. Yes, so that night.
Further questions? Back to you, Councillor Ellis. Sorry, Councillor.
We've got a motion on the table we need to vote on.
Councillor Ellis, you had your follow-up question?
Hold on. We've got a motion.
I do think that there are, this is a particularly important document, and that rushing it through doesn't achieve too much in a mad rush. We need to take our time, think about what's happening. Every year I draw attention to the issue of the 5% pensioner discount. And this year, Ms Collins, I ask again that is that an appropriate amount of discount to assist people who are doing it particularly hard in our community? This year, the amount of discount offered to pensioners is $57, and at a 5% discount rate on the average rateable income of properties across the broad shire, that is much less than that 5% figure. Can you tell me what action officers can take to address that weakness?
Thank you, Councillor Ellis. The application of a fixed amount in terms of the additional rebate for eligible pensioners was discussed through the rating strategy when the rating strategy came before council. So in terms of what that is, that's totally council's decision, not the officers' decision. The officers will just put the information forward for councillors then to decide in terms of the whole rating strategy, from differential rating waste right through to any other rebates that they may wish to apply. So that's what's in the budget here is a direct result of the adopted rating strategy of council this year, rather than the officers' thoughts.
Another matter of community well-being, I note in your briefing sheet under project highlights that under the heading footpaths and cycleways, and it shows including the Omeo Mountain Bike Trail Stage 1, 1.5 million. Now, the total proposed budget for that is only 2.149 million, so 2,200,000. Ms Collins, is that an appropriate report to council? Because footpaths, I understand we have 54 kilometres worth of footpaths in the Shire of East Gippsland, and with the presentations I have made to me, we need to allocate all our monies to that. So what's that Omeo bike trail, which I understand is the mountain bike trail, is that the appropriate section to have that particular commercial venture in?
Thank you, Councillor Ellis. In terms of the Capital Works program, I'll need to pass across to Mr Waits, whose area manages the Capital Works programs and the classification and allocation of those works.
Councillor, I think it would be a fairly logical classification to sit it under. It's a recreational path of some form. Your comment about whether we should be allocating that $1.15 million to footpaths. Historically, council has spent in the order of, I think, around the 100 to 150,000 a year on footpath works. It would be a huge change to our historic way of dealing with footpaths, but of course that's a council decision at the end of the day. But obviously we held councillor workshops regarding the capital program, so I'm a little bemused that that issue's been raised tonight.
Well, I'm glad you're a bit bemused, Mr Waits, but I think if I was to take a straw poll, I don't think too many councillors remember that the funding for this particular project, which is still aspirational, was to be taken from the footpath construction or repair budget. I don't recall that at all personally, and I take a particular interest in these sorts of things. So I'm pleased you'd be amused. I think that I don't ask you for a reply.
Did you have a further question, Councillor?
I did, but I'm under a bit of pressure to matter to the vote, Mr Mayor.
It's not like you to fold the pressure, Councillor Ellis.
No. That's what we continue. Unless there's some other councillor.
Was there any other questions? We have an amendment that we have to deal with. The Speaker of the amendment, would you like to speak?
Thank you, Mr Mayor. It's been raised about the amount that farmers pay in rates. This amendment is not about farmers, it's about the entire Shire. There is extreme financial difficulty within the broader part of the Shire, and I also include self-retirees, shop owners with no tenants, and low-income earners who don't receive much of a pay rise annually. So we're asking them to pay more rates, and just puts more pressure. Now, it was a little bit disturbing to me before that I was chastised by staff for late notice on this issue. I did remind them, because they said the budget had been spoken about earlier. I did remind them that I was on leave of absence. Then I was told that I could have emailed. My trip to the Kimberleys did not include even phone coverage. So, and unfortunately, I've been unwell since that trip. So I thought I was doing the appropriate thing. I spoke earlier today to councillors about my thoughts on this issue. I also think that I've seen some errors of judgment with expenditure in the last 6 or 8 months, which would more than cover, if those errors were not made, would more than cover this rate reduction, or no increase to rates. And I look at that because, I've been, unfortunately, been told that by putting this motion forward, that it'll make me look like a fool. Well, so be it. I'm in this position for the ratepayers and the residents of this Shire, and I would hope that my input could improve the way the Shire does its business in terms of correcting mistakes and losses of money. Now, please, Ms Collins, I have the greatest respect for your work, because you actually get thrown all these nasty curveballs and you seem to come out the other end managing to balance the books, and I think that's a marvellous job, because this, these curveballs are costing the Shire money internally, and that's the reason. I still think that it's something that would help the community. I've been told that this would, if this went, if this motion was to get up, that it would put the Shire behind by years and years. Well, I do disagree, because we are still a growing area in a residential style. In other words, there are more and more ratepayers coming to this area. So I'm sure that the Shire will pick up more rates through the fact that we have more development and more people coming to retire to this area. So I would just like other councillors to think of what I've said. Unfortunately, we were backed into a corner an hour ago and had a straw poll, which suggested that this motion will be defeated. Look, you can look at me like this, but I'm just saying it as it is and as it has been. That's the way I do business. So thank you.
The seconder, would you like to speak? Councillor Roberts.
Nothing further to add, Mr Mayor. Thank you.
Is there any further speakers? Councillor Buckley.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. The most common complaint is that rates are too high. Last election, the need to bring down rates was a key issue. People see us as wasteful with not enough attention to compliance in big tenders and major works. They say we spend too much on Melbourne lawyers and consultants, too much on self-promotion and too much on interstate trips with staff as well as councillors going along. Rates have more than doubled in 10 years, while many people in East Gippsland are struggling. It has been a drought year, and in Bairnsdale there are more and more empty shops. As a council, we should be working to bring rates down and not just year by year, raising them as high as the government cap will permit. Now, I'd like to emphasise the unfairness in our rating system and work towards an improvement. I'll keep keeping in mind that the municipal charge is a tax. Well, our highest capital value, capital improved value, that's CIV, in this municipality is $30,627,000, and the lowest capital improved valuation equals 1,000. And we're paying the same, the one with the $1,000 capital improved value, he's paying the same rate tax, if you like, because municipal charge is a tax of $289.71. That's an unfairness ratio of 30,627 to 1. And so I think that this, I know we're working towards 10% capital improved value, but I don't think that's good enough. And keeping in mind that only about half the municipalities have it. Now, one capital improved value tax, it is not our business what people do with their properties, provided it's within the law. And we could avoid all these grey areas like little workshops ran in residential areas that really technically should be paying under our system a commercial rate, but they're paying a residential rate. And the other one is, of course, is the farm rate, but I'm not going there right now. So I am speaking in favour of the amendment, and I put it to you that we ought to support it and then rework the figures a little bit. Thank you, fellow councillors.
Thank you, Councillor Buckley.
I'd like to talk against the amendment.
Councillor Pels is speaking against the amendment.
Yes, I'd like to speak against the amendment.
Can I just clarify, just to assist you, Councillor, are you responding as your right of reply, or you?
No, this is the amendment. We're dealing with the amendment, Councillor.
Yeah.
I'd like to speak against the amendment. I disagree with Councillor White that he's only had the opportunity of the last month to be able to discuss the budget as it is. We've been working on this budget since February this year, so we've had 4 months discussing this, and at no other stage has it come to the table about rate reductions, zero rates, even the municipal charge hasn't even been discussed. And whilst Councillor Buckley actually brings it up every year, at this time he doesn't ever bring it up at our meetings when we're actually talking about the budget. So to me, I feel like this evening they're actually trying to put in something quite difficult for council and our time frames that we actually have, because we only have until the 30th of June to adopt a budget for this council for the next financial year. If we don't adopt the budget, we have nothing to work with, and we then have to go back out to the public with some new form of what these gentlemen are trying to propose. A, it's delaying the process, and B, we start in 6 months' time again on next year's budget, and I feel it would be more appropriate to be bringing these issues up so that we can deal with them as a council as a whole in the next year's budget. Which is why I'm saying to you, we do need to proceed tonight with what we have on the table that we've been working for 4 months with. I think the officers have made an excellent budget for us. There's plenty of things for all areas on the table. We've even got $1 million savings in services that we've been able to adhere to for the last 3 years. So as it stands, I'm not prepared to support the amendment tonight.
Thanks, Councillor Pels. Councillor White, you have a right of reply on that amendment. Unless there's further speakers. Councillor Ellis, you wish to speak for or against?
I follow the sentiment of...
So you're speaking for or against?
I'm speaking against, Mr Mayor, but I do follow the sentiment of the two previous speakers and understand their position. But the situation is, as has been explained to Council, is that the complications in relation to the non-passing of a budget, the fact that the budget is in itself sound, makes it very difficult not to follow a proper process and allow the budget to take its natural course. We have plenty of opportunity, as Councillor Pelt said, to work to a budget into the future. And we need to have some clear thought in relation to rate reductions and, or in that matter, rate increases. That said, I cannot support the amendment to the motion before Council this evening.
Thanks, Councillor Ellis. Any further speakers? I'll ask Councillor White if he'd like a right of reply. I'll put the amendment. All those in favour of the amendment? We have 3 in favour of the amendment. Those against the amendment? There's 5 against the amendment. Now it takes us back to the motion. Councillor Pels.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. As already stated, the actual increase of the 2.25% when viewing it isn't excessive. When you look at the Bureau of Statistics CPI figures for 2018, it is 2.2%. So it means our budget is 0.05% more than CPI, which doesn't actually buy you a lot in the big frame of things. With the amount of services, over 100 services that Council actually delivers, I think with regards to what needs to be achieved and what my colleagues are aiming for, we'll need to start thinking about service reductions. And I think in the big scenario of things, that will need to be done with some really careful planning and some more vision in next year's budget. As this budget stands, the budget has been framed to ensure the organisation is appropriately resourced to deliver the works, services and initiatives set out in the revised Council Plan 2017 to 2021. It responds directly to the plan's strategic objectives. The Council is a strong financial position and can provide the future generations for East Gippslanders. It delivers a significant capital works program of $41.898 million with a significant focus on the renewal of East Gippsland's considerable infrastructure. It includes funding of $10.5 million of roads, $3 million for bridges, $4.4 for the Bensdale Aquatic Recreation Centre, and the project in whole will cost $6.3 million over 2 years, so it's been split. It also has a council contribution of $3.3 million and the Victorian Government will contribute matching amounts of $3 million. $7.6 million will be spent on other recreation and park projects including streetscapes. $1.5 million is planned, as Councillor Ellis said, for the Omeo mountain bike trail, with 50% of this project to be funded by a government grant initiative, which I think the bulk of the funding should come from. $2.98 million has been put aside for waste projects, which will be an area that we probably need to think severely or heavily about over the next 12 months on what's going to happen in that space. The budget includes $6 million in landfill rehabilitation works, which will be undertaken during the 2018-19 year. The impact of the increased cost of handling recyclable waste has added an additional $400,000 to the 2018-19 operational budget, and we've been able to accommodate this by adding an additional $15 per curbside collection for the whole year. It is expected to recover the remainder of the amounts in cost. It is pleasing to note that Council's sound financial position over the 4 years of the strategic resource plan has been met, and operational surpluses are expected in all areas. Despite that, I think the major thing is that we are only 0.05 above CPI, and it is not an exorbitant amount to ask. I do understand that the region is suffering, but the whole region, it's not just the Bairnsdale area. When you go to Orbost, it's devastating to see, and they're making people in times of hardship are resilient, and they make great decisions and support each other through harder times. The bottom line is we are seeing cost reductions in Melbourne as well, and I think we're probably coming into a stage of our economy where we're actually needing to consider reductions of some type. So I look forward with my councillors to proceed next year on a rate reduction or some kind of budget reduction with regards to what we're actually asking the community to pay. So thank you with regards to that, councillors, I recommend this budget to you to support.
Thank you, Councillor Pels. As a seconder, Councillor O'Connell, would you like to speak?
Thanks, Mr Mayor. I would like to reiterate Councillor Peltz's arguments. It's important to recognise that we do have a responsibility to hold the council in a strong financial position, not just for the next 12 months, but for the long term. Just to clarify a few points that I'd like to make. Just as money is allocated to seawall replacement or streetscape projects, projects like the Omion mountain bike track will aid in economic development for the whole of East Gippsland. It's not an aspirational project. It's got strong support from our federal member and local member, and there are current applications in grant funding at a federal and a state level, which we should find out in a few months. Hopefully not that long, but the return on investment with council is significant, and so like Councillor Pelt said, there are projects across the Shire that will benefit all towns, our 40 towns, so let's not cherry pick our projects just because, I don't know. Anyway, that's all I have to say. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor O'Connell. Any further speakers against? Councillor Roberts.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. While I understand and applaud the tremendous hard work that goes into the annual budget by Ms Collins and the team, just not sold on it. I know we face challenging times with rate capping, increase in waste recycling expenses, among other costly responsibilities passed down to us by the state government. I think we can do better. We need to focus on maintaining our vital infrastructure and amenities, roads, footpaths and the like. And I would like to see a little more realistic capital works budget and give our ratepayers some room to breathe. Perhaps some non-essential projects could be postponed to such a time when our economic outlook is a little clearer, especially considering council will be required to cap its municipal charge next year, taking it from up to 20% down to 10%. I'm not saying that we shouldn't be investing in our region. Of course, that's vital to the growth and viability of our Shire. I'd just like to see us work within our means and not expect the ratepayer to foot the ever-increasing bill. Thank you.
Thanks, Councillor Roberts. Speaking for? Yeah, just had one against. I'll talk speaker for.
No, I'm speaking against.
Councillor Ellis, can you speak?
I'm allowed to speak against it, aren't I?
I'm just taking against and for.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Councillor Roberts spoke against the vote.
Yeah.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I take this opportunity to speak to the budget and to support it. I'd firstly like to thank the large number of citizens that made a submission this year to our budget. It's probably the highest number that we've had. So that's a very healthy thing. Going through and having worked on the budget, it's very pleasing to report to the community that the Shire is in a fine and strong financial position. The balances that we have kept and the appropriate financial management exhibited by Ms Collins and her team and by our operational staff has shown through to the projects that we have been able to complete successfully this year. One only has to travel around the Shire to see the new bridge works, across the Shire, the new footbridge works, to name a few. It's acknowledged that we've had a few blowouts that are concerning to us, but we're in such a good position we're able to manage those. We won't be looking for those problems next year. I look forward next year to us working with council officers to provide an even better and stronger budget position so as that we can address the inequities that are in our community at the present time to support not only the poor old farmers, as Councillor White refers to, but also all sectors of our community that are in need of assistance through their local government. Ladies and gentlemen, I commend the budget to you.
Thanks, Councillor Ellis. Councillor Buckley speaking against the motion.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. This was in the Addy, so we know it's the gospel. New measures to ensure service charges levied by councils do not exceed the cost of these services. Well, as I pointed out to you before with the $30 million property, he's paying the same tax as the $1,000 bloke. So where's the fairness in that? The $1,000 bloke, 1,000 whatever it is, the valuation, capital improved value, he's paying the same amount as the 30 million one. So where's the fairness in the fee for service for that? Thank you, Mr Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Buckley. Councillor Toohey, you wanted to speak for the motion?
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I'm speaking for the motion. I think the budget, whilst it would be nice to have a rate reduction, I don't think at this point it would be a prudent thing to do. Having said that, I would look forward to making some savings next year and not having any of the issues that we've had in the last 12 months, and be put in a position where potentially next year we will be in a position where we could either limit the rate rise down to zero or closer to that than what it's been this year. I see that it is important that we're in a very strong position, and I see that the putting in a rate rise this year will put us into a far stronger position on top of the savings that we're hoping to gain from our budget, will allow us then to potentially look at a very limited increase next year. Thank you.
Thanks, Councillor Toohey. Speaker against the motion? Councillor White.
I would just like it noted that that three councillors who have spoken for the budget have muted how well, or have said how well we are financially, and then muted that we should be looking at rate reductions. And I would just like it on the record that perhaps in the next 12 months that those three councillors stick to their word, because then we may see something like that occur. Thank you.
Is there any further speakers? If not, I'll just add a quick comment. Thank to staff working with the constraints, the assumptions, our rating strategy in a rate capped environment of 2.25%. A budget has been developed that will continue to deliver services to the community at the existing levels they expect. And for not much more than 2 Vic Roads vehicle registrations, think about the services that get delivered out of this council. Thank you. Councillor Pels.
Thank you. I'll have the right of reply, if I may, Mr Mayor.
You do have.
Yes, interesting, the comments around the table. You can see that all councillors are quite passionate about their vote and how they're going to support it, but needless to say, the support of officers and also the community writing in and letting us know where their thoughts are on this particular budget, I think was really appreciated, and it gave us avenue of being able to address their concerns and particularly to be able to resolve areas of concern for next year's budget. With regards to Councillor White and his comments, it wasn't a tongue-in-cheek thing. The bottom line was that you've come to us a bit too late, and we do all strive to deliver the same services at the right cost, and to me the budget is something that is actually going to deliver us that. And with regards to us supporting reductions for next year, we were saying we were happy to work alongside you and deliver those if possible. So I think, you know, we look forward to another year next year, and I think the officers will be able to have some kind of insight on what direction councillors want to head. Thank you all. I commend this budget to you.
Thanks, Councillor Pels. That exhausts the debate. I will now put the motion. All those in favour? 5 in favour. Those against? 3 against. The motion is carried. Thank you. Now being 6:54 p.m, the meeting is closed.